All right, so this is part 2 of 2. If you've been waiting for this episode, definitely stay tuned. In the next couple of seconds, we will be going over the rest of the interview between Brian and I, going over the relationship between the Moissanite industry, the lab-created industry, as well as the jewelry industry, and how that relates to veganism. Okay, so, and on top of that, how social media plays a huge part in displaying the information that people are seeking for. Here you go. Obviously, this is a jewelry channel, so why are we talking about veganism, right? So, and when I was talking to you, I wanted to find a common denominator, just so that I can share two different worlds that may also share the same passion, if you will. And I would have to say that the one common denominator of a few that I could think of is the fact that it's truly an art, right? Many times when people purchase jewelry from us or reach out to us to custom their pieces, we have to really digest as to what they are trying to make, right?
Right.
And
yeah.
And I would say it's very similar to probably what you would have to think. Okay, well, if I had to recreate this dish, how do I do that? Right. And so when it comes to jewelry, if we had to create something that is really just an idea out of someone's mind, especially if they are to draw it on a piece of paper, how do we make that come to life?
Right.
So, so it takes a lot of creativity, and it takes definitely a lot of brainstorming.
Yeah, and I'd imagine too when they're investing like a serious, they're making a serious investment not only in their future because this thing's going to be around forever, but in you, right?
Yeah.
It has to spark that emotional connection too.
Oh, that's 100% what it is, right?
Yeah. So that's got to be hard for you to just kind of like, how do I design this to make this connection with this person, right?
100%. And I say this quite often, actually. I take every single transaction so seriously, only because, and I preach this to my staff. I mean, we're in the business of celebration. Right. So most people that buy jewelry from us, it's not because they're sad about something. It's usually for like a beautiful event in their life, like a wedding, an anniversary, a gift, a birthday, right? So if for them to choose us out of all of the other options out there, it's a huge compliment.
Right.
And so I definitely take that seriously. And it's not only just a financial investment, but like you said, it's more of an emotional investment because it's a symbolism that symbolizes that special day in their events.
It's true.
Right? So,
it's really true.
So it's huge. So yes, so we definitely take it very seriously, and we want to make sure that we design it to their liking, to the best of our ability, based on their visions. Right. So, so that primarily that's where it starts from nothing to something. Right.
Yep. So a lot of what I embrace is a sustainable kind of like low footprint on the planet type of thing with veganism.
Right.
Maybe you can share a little bit more like about that connection with like a lab grown process versus
absolutely.
A traditional.
So primarily what our business is currently focusing on is Moissanite jewelry. There's a difference between Moissanite and lab grown diamonds, right? And so the difference between Moissanite is it's a material that can be made, man-made, that is cut, polished, faceted into a gemstone called Moissanite. Now, whereas lab-grown diamonds, it's 100% diamond. So all a diamond is, just in case you don't know, is it's basically a piece of carbon. That's what it is. So instead of mining from the earth, and really, I mean, to mine, I'm not sure if you've ever read any document or seen any documentaries about it, or read any articles about it, but sometimes it does put a toll on the environment, right? So when you grow in a lab, there are companies out there that can mimic, if you will, the ability of how Earth creates diamonds. So from pressure and heat.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So then it'll grow, and then it'll grow into a piece of rough before it's cut and polished into a polished diamond. Now it's 100% diamond, The only difference is that you classify it as a lab grown versus natural, because you don't want to, if you prefer, if a person prefers natural, it's wrong to say that's, it's natural when it's lab grown, and vice versa, right? So in terms of sustainability and the future, I would have to say that's, people know, people that follow our channel definitely understand our standpoint. We definitely see this as the future. For sure. Mined gems. I think natural diamonds and natural gemstones will always be around. There's always going to be hobbyists and enthusiasts of natural gemstones. Just like I would have to say, there's probably going to always be people that will always eat meat, right? So for sure, I think it's always going to be around. But when lab-grown and moissanite jewelry first came out, I think a lot of people thought it was just a fad. It was just a trend that's going to go away.
It's interesting.
But
that's also another common denominator.
Yeah. Is that right? Right? Is that right? Yeah.
Well, I would think so.
Right. Yeah. I don't think so. I think it's a growing thing.
It is.
Yeah, it's definitely. But that being said, lab-grown diamonds as well as other gemstones and moissanite, there are many factors as to why people will purchase it. But to your point, yes, one of it's for sustainability and for a greener earth. Because it requires a lot of, I guess, number one, unnecessary resources to impact natural resources, right? So to mine a diamond when it can't technically be lab grown. So
it's interesting stuff.
The same looks and visuals and optical properties and all of that. So
yeah, so so that's funny, because like if they are the same, it's almost like.
But there is a difference.
There is a difference.
Yeah.
And I think if you made two dishes that are identical, but it's cooked by two different people, it's almost the same, right? It's like, this actually tastes way different.
Right.
So how do you really show that difference, right?
There's a scientific difference, and then there's another difference, and I'll get into that. The scientific difference is that you could send it to a lab. There are very sophisticated machinery and equipment and professionals that will be able to identify it between a lab-grown and obviously a natural diamond.
Sure.
Now, the main difference, if anything at all, is that jewelry is very emotional. It's an emotional buy for the most part. For people that are more into lab grown, they typically do not want naturals, and then for those that prefer naturals, typically do not want lab grown because they find an emotional connection to something that's created by Mother Earth.
Right.
Versus the opposite. The reason why they don't want that is because they love Mother Earth and they don't want to.
That's
so
so
it's
weird.
a complete opposite
That's so strange.
thinking, right? And there's really no right or wrong answer. I would say, to each their own.
Right.
Do you, right? So same message. Hey, you do you. And we try not to judge or be unbiased.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's crazy. It's almost like, what matrix are you in?
Right.
You could be that, or you could be the other.
Right, choose
blue
one.
pill or red pill.
Right. There's 8 billion people in the world. There's always going to be conflicting sides, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, almost 8 billion, I believe. So there's a lot of people.
There's too many people.
Right. And it's funny because when I talked to you like a couple of weeks ago about this, I guess you didn't even know about it, right?
I didn't.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea that the looks and the quality and the feel could just be so. It's exactly the same. Like, you would never know to the naked eye.
Yeah.
You know?
You wouldn't.
But more so, what I was excited about was that impact to the environment. I mean, the only extent of knowledge I know, I wouldn't say the only, but everybody's seen the movie Blood Diamond.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And there's a lot of conflict.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of resources that go into mining and all of that.
Right.
So I could definitely see this being the future in terms of just a lot more sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Less resources, basically the same awesome product.
Right.
Right? If you have a preference for that, like you said earlier.
If I would say, if you're an individual or a consumer that wants to buy a diamond and you just love the fact of how it looks, the optical properties, then it wouldn't matter if it's a natural or lab, right? Mm-hmm. But if you actually have more of a reason, such as how it impacts the environment, you probably will go for a lab. But if you have a more of a traditional way of thinking, hey, believe it or not, I mean, we get a lot of emails that moissanite or lab diamonds are fake. I'm not going to buy anything fake, right? So I think that is a misconception that people well, I mean, again, to each their own.
You got to get
but
though.
it's like, how were you taught as growing up?
Right.
It's usually your reality when you're older.
Yep.
Right. So that's usually the case. My forecast of the future is millennials and the younger generation will grow up in a different way of thinking.
Totally.
Yeah, and so I don't know where the future of the natural diamond business will be, but if I had to take my bets, I would say it's going to be very equivalent in the next maybe 20, 30 years, where it's going to be 50-50, if not more towards the lab side.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Well, because from a cost perspective too.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts
It's
on
night
that?
and day.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that can be made, you can control the cost. Anything that is not quantifiable, where you have to actually dig it up and depends on the supply, then that can be marked up. But that being said, there's also a huge misconception that diamonds are rare, right? So there are a lot of diamonds out there. It's just it was controlled by, for the longest time, it was controlled by a very big company on the supply and how much it was going to be released to make sure the prices are kept at a certain price.
Right.
So it's all supply and demand. So
it's tricky.
It's very tricky. I would have to say this, based on my own personal experience. I have been to many, many, many trade shows, diamond trade shows, jewelry trade shows. You would not believe how many diamonds are out there. You go to a trade show, you're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of diamonds, right? So it's, personally speaking, I don't think it's as rare as what people think it is.
Right.
I think it's more of an idea that has been traditionally taught, and so when you get older and you think that's the case, when sometimes it's not, right? So again, your reality becomes what you're taught. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean that's the truth.
That's crazy because now I feel like what you're doing is more rare than the actual diamond supply that exists.
Yeah.
And that's kind of true if you think about it. Like how many people are actually doing lab grown versus traditional?
Right.
Not a lot, I bet.
Not a lot, only because many people in the jewelry business traditionally come from, it's passed on by their great grandfathers, grandmothers, and moms and dads, and it gets passed on. So if they built their business based on natural gemstones, then they will have a negative connotation to sell lab grown, because that totally defeats what they've been doing for so long, right? So
that's really interesting you say that, because I feel like that's the same case with diets. Like trying to, and I wouldn't say like, okay, there's no Chinese vegans out there,
right?
But traditionally Chinese food is it's not very vegan friendly. Like there's meat, there's a lot of meat in that diet. Right. A lot of Asian cultures too.
Totally. I would say most cultures. Right?
Yeah.
So I would say most cultures.
And to break that tradition, because it's been just recipes have been passed down from generation to generation. Just like if you're in the diamond business, that natural gem has been passed down in the way that we know the world and the way we've been operating in it. Right. How do you break that mold? It's impossible. Not impossible, but it's harder.
It takes time.
It takes time, but it's hard.
New ideas take time, and then it depends on who adopts the idea.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the important thing is to continue to spread the message if you believe it enough, and then for those that also believe the same message, we'll spread the message for you. Yeah. Right. And if there aren't enough adopters, then so be it. I mean, at least that was an idea in time that was in history, right? So
totally, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of correlations.
Yeah.
I mean, we could probably talk a lot more similarities than we even brainstormed before.
Yeah, totally.
Actually.
So I mean, the whole idea to have you come in was okay. Well, how do we find a few common denominators to talk about it? Now that we're kind of talking through it, it definitely seems like there's a huge correlation.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things. Like even when you said the whole wedding thing, like it's an actual like ceremony, but like I'm presenting this, like, I'm so privileged that you're choosing me to provide this for that ceremony, that one special time in your life.
Right.
Think about what the food caterers are thinking too, right? Like, how many food caterers are there in the world, but you chose my flavors? Awesome.
Right. And I can't imagine the headaches that if they're not happy with the food. I mean, the pressure. God.
Yeah.
This food is huge when it comes to celebrating.
It's
right? I mean,
big.
Yeah, it's huge.
The biggest.
Right. So
volume-wise, yeah, like everyone needs to eat, right?
Totally. And I mean, coming from an Asian background, Asian American background with a lot of Asian roots, a lot of times the traditional Asian parents and grandparents, they're very judgmental when it comes to the food.
Understatement of the year right there. Judgment not only on food, everything.
Right. Yeah, it's like, hey, did they do this properly? Did they, yeah. It's
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
The food is big, as is the jewelry.
Right. So that being said, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience here that maybe a nugget that they could take with them in terms of what you have to offer, something that you do on a day-to-day basis that may bring some value to their lives?
Other than just being super mindful of like what you're consuming, I think is a great first step. Because you don't, I mean, like there's people that maybe just want to have a meatless Monday. That's a perfect example. Meatless Monday's awesome. It's an awesome concept. Do you have to transform yourself to be completely vegan? Like, that's kind of on you, right? But if you want to embrace meatless Mondays, and that actually is impacting, like, how many Mondays do you have in the lifespan that you live? Like, that's a huge impact to the world and the planet. You're not consuming meat that one day. That is big on the supply and demand of meat. And if you can lower that just a little bit, if you can just lower that demand so that the suppliers can just adjust it a little bit so that there's just not so much wasteful animal product out there, that's huge. You're saving lives. That's how I look at it. And the same with leather. If you can just maybe go for the faux leather, because like that actually not only is better, but it actually looked better maybe. You just gave yourself another option, a buying option. Maybe it was less money. Right? So there's a lot of things to consider when you consume.
Makes sense.
We were talking about social media as well, and I think social media definitely sheds a lot of light on not only veganism, but it helps it propel itself. Because when I look at trend charts in the vegan world, and you just, perfect example is just go and Google trends, right, and just type in vegan versus other diets, like there's a big difference of terms of what it is now versus what it was like when I started being vegan, like 3 or 4 years ago. And I think a lot of it has to do with media and social media content.
Would you say it's for the better or for the worse?
Definitely for the better. Right? So many more documentaries have been produced on veganism that weren't available when I started this, and that's awesome, right? I think that social media content is huge in terms of propelling a subject like very traditional things like lab-grown gem versus traditional gems.
Right. And I would have to say I 100% agree there. And that's the reason why we're so big on making sure that our message comes across in all the outlets that we can potentially push out. From this podcast to YouTube, to Instagram, Facebook, what have you. Because for the longest time, traditional media fell in, between a few channels, right? CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, right? So when an ad is placed, you're kind of forced to watch it, right?
It's crammed down your throat, basically.
Here's the product, and this is what you'll learn from it, and that's it. Now, everyone can personalize whatever they want to learn, and have maybe a certain intuition about their own personal lives that they've always known that there's probably someone out there that probably believe the same thing. So let's see if we can find some information. That's the beauty of the internet, because you can personalize it and cater it to yourself.
Absolutely.
And so that's exactly what social media is, right? So, and on any topic, from being a vegan to lab grown to Moissanite or anything else, right? And I think that's the power of social media. And I think that's the reason why your page has grown so much in such a short time span, right? I mean, it's huge. I've been following you when you had like maybe, I think 100 or 200 followers, and that's when you made your first second post or something
Started
like
posting
that.
food photos.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, look what Brian's doing. So,
It's awesome.
Yeah, which is really cool. And then now that I see it, I'm like, wow, you're definitely growing the page.
Yeah.
And definitely the pictures help, man.
Yes.
Continue to do that.
Quality content in
Quality.
any social media activity.
Huge.
It's big.
Huge.
It's big. But also just sharing the story about it. I think when you look at people's Instagram feed, for example, having like a good representation of, like, from a first glance of someone's grid, for example, like, what is this person about?
Right.
Trying to show that is super important to grab that person into your kind of mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, it could be all selfies or, whatever, but like, if that's what you want to show, that's what you want to show. But if you want to be a little bit more comprehensive and cohesive with what you're doing, tell that story through that social media campaign you're pushing out. It's awesome.
No, totally. I would have to agree. So, that being said, I mean, in terms of the whole social media aspect, I mean, are there specific strategies that you may potentially be willing to share with our audience that may be thinking about starting their own page?
Yeah.
That may relate to what you're doing, that may be thinking about maybe jump-starting that new business idea?
Totally.
I mean, is there like a certain strategy that you've used?
I would say the biggest strategy is produce content and don't be such a perfectionist about it.
I would agree 100% there.
Yeah. Like, whatever's holding you back from making something, don't let it hold you back.
Mm-hmm.
Just create it to create it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can always grow from it. You can create more on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a lot of feedback from that content
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, like, what maybe people are gravitating towards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's huge, right? That not only gives you motivation to create more versus if you never created from the get-go,
Mm-hmm.
but you can also just figure out how to improve and how to attract this similar mindset.
Right.
Like, if you want to attract friends with the same interests,
Mm-hmm.
post stuff that you like.
Yeah.
And you're going to find somebody that likes the exact same thing. And that's the power of that, right?
Right.
So maybe just less focus on the quality of that content and more of that content is what I would say. Some other strategies are don't keep doing the same things. Like, take a step back from what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you have created all this content, take a step back and force yourself to change sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And relook at things, because social media, and it's unfair kind of, because once you think you have the algorithm figured out or something, and a lot of people think and talk about this algorithm that exists, and it does exist. It exists in everything we do, but it always changes. So your strategy from 3 months ago it may not even work 3 months later, right? In the future, it's just never set in stone. So always just kind of take a step back and really think about, how do I make things better? How do I improve on this? What are other people doing? What are other successful people doing?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they've switched up their style that I can bring over to my channel. So these are all things that I would encourage to constantly
I would
move.
say it's all about adapting.
Totally,
Right,
and
because-
fast.
Yeah, because the world's constantly changing with or without you.
Yes.
Right. So, and same with social media. So, I mean, you think about a company like Facebook or Instagram, they're going to constantly improve their platform.
Yep.
And their idea is that they're trying to improve it to continue to engage users. So whatever's engaging more users, they're going to change their algorithm based on that.
Yep.
So if what you've done in the past is no longer working for the majority, chances are it's not going to work.
Exactly.
Because Facebook's going to change that up.
Exactly.
Instagram's going to change that up.
Exactly.
Same with all the other platforms. So I would have to agree, constantly adapt, change, try new things. And if it's not working, definitely change it up.
Yeah.
Can't keep doing the same things and expect a different result, right?
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people always look for this, like, kind of golden formula, this template of, like, hey, what's going to make my Instagram channel poppin' or my YouTube channel poppin', and I don't know if there is, like, one thing.
Right.
Like, there's literally hundreds of factors. There's timing, there's opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
there's being places at the right moment that puts you ahead of something else.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, the one thing is always going to be true is that if you never start creating that content, you will never have that opportunity to see where you can go.
Totally. And just don't, and also at the same time, if there's something that I can add to it is, to add to what you're saying about try not to be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
Only because, don't be afraid of the fear of judgment, right? Just throw it out there, and there'll be people that'll like it, and there'll be people that won't.
You're never gonna please everyone.
Yeah.
Never.
Ever. Ever. That's a fact of life. If there's a fact of life, you won't please everybody.
That is totally true. And that's hard, but I wouldn't take it personal.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's just the internet, right?
Yeah, you shouldn't. You shouldn't take it personal.
Yeah.
So.
Totally.
All right. So that being said, hey Brian, thanks for.
It was awesome. Yes.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. We should maybe do this again in the future sometime, right? So that'll be pretty cool.
Yep.
If we get our mutual friend to join us, he's a little private, but.
Yeah. Well, and I'm also happy to if you get any comments or anybody out there have questions, I'm happy to help answer those.
Cool. Thanks for tuning in again, and this is. Well, I guess I wouldn't say the podcast number anymore. I think it's podcast 23. I'm going to throw it out there. I think I'm right. Podcast 24. 24. Thanks, Brian. The other Brian. Anyway, so thanks. If you guys like what you saw, definitely leave a comment below. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel. Even if you don't like it, let us know what you don't like. If there's a subject that you want me to cover in the future, leave a comment. We always read all of our comments. We definitely put it on a list of new topics. And then, once we get to it, we might make a video, a podcast, a Geminar, showcase just for you. Okay? That being said, this is my friend Brian. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Later, guys.